Welcome, new and old friends. My name is 2482, and tonight is a bit odd. I normally like to tell only fiction or true stories together, but I couldn't pass up continuing the Mall Santa story for you. So we'll start this evening with 2 Let's Not Meets, and end it with Mall Santa Part 2. Turn off your lights, make sure your doors and windows are locked. It's about to get spooky. I was stalked for months by a guy who worked at my local grocery store, by the Demon Queen Luna. This happened 4 years ago. I was 20 at the time. The first time I met the guy who became my grocery store stalker, he was standing outside the store collecting money for the Salvation Army Christmas time donations. I'm a fairly friendly person, so I like to say hi to people who work at places I frequent to be nice. This kid was around my age, very tall, with a mild resemblance to Lurch from Addams Family. Dark circles under his eyes, short black hair, kind of a vacant look in his eyes. I chatted with him for maybe 2 minutes, just idle chit-chat about the weather and whatnot. Nothing particularly memorable or interesting, and then waved goodbye and went home. Little did I know that single moment would be the start of something that would have me genuinely afraid. About 4 or 5 months passed and I hadn't seen him again. Then one day, as I was grocery shopping with a friend, when we were chit-chatting, she suddenly got really quiet and kind of recoiled backwards, looking behind me. I turned around to see this guy, who had to be 6'4", towering over me, not 8 inches from my body. He said hi and told me he remembered me from that December I had talked to him, and then asked me for my number. I, being young and never had experienced this type of interaction before, told him I didn't have my number memorized, but that I would write his down and text him later. I half waved my phone at him, pointing at my at-the-time boyfriend, whose picture was my wallpaper, making a point to say, "Oh look, that's my boyfriend," to the guy, hoping he would clue in, but no luck. He told me his number, which immediately upon getting I blocked without letting him get my phone number. However, what really made my blood run cold was what he said after I put my phone away. He leaned in real close and in a low voice he told me,
"Whatever I text you is for your eyes only."
At this point, I started to feel genuinely uncomfortable. I said, "Yeah, sure, nice talking to you, but gotta get back to shopping." And I grabbed my friend and dragged her off, shooting a panicked look at her and asking why she didn't bail me out. Apparently, he scared her too with his getting so close to me, and she didn't know what to do. I want to make it clear, I'm not exactly a small girl. At 5'8" and solidly built, I can certainly handle myself and very rarely feel intimidated or small in the presence of anyone, male or female. But this guy made me feel tiny and scared. In the months that would follow, he would make me feel truly frightened. I had hoped that creepy interaction would be the last time I saw him, but that was unfortunately not the case. After that initial meeting with him saying the creepy thing about his texts being for my eyes only, it seemed like I would run into him every single time that I got into the store. No matter what checkout lane I was in, he'd always seem to appear at the end of it when I was finished shopping. And every time I was in the store, I would notice him out of the corner of my eye, watching me, no matter what area I was in. One time, I even caught him following me out to the car. At that point, I got scared and decided to say something to the managers. After letting the managers know what was going on, they assured me they would tell him not to talk to me. After that, he wouldn't speak to me, but I would continue to see him following me around the store at a distance every time that I went up there. It got so bad and I felt so frightened that I started to be afraid to go to the store at all. But I am one of those stubborn people who refuses to be intimidated by someone to the point I'll stop doing something. I had hoped that maybe it was a coincidence that he was following me. After all, it was a big store, and maybe he just had things to do that happened to be in the same areas I was shopping in. So I started to pay close attention to my surroundings. Once I started really paying attention, I realized that every single time I was up there, I would constantly notice him in the area of the store I was in. During my last encounter with him, I went up to the store to grab 2 or 3 items I needed for dinner that night, and I first saw him standing outside the store when I got there, and with his back to me, I quickly ran inside, hoping he didn't see me. Unfortunately, a few minutes later, I saw him at the very back of the store, and items in hand, I immediately beelined towards the front. As soon as I got near the checkout, I ducked behind one of the shelf displays and watched carefully at the front of the store to see if CC would appear. And he did. I watched as he looked up and down the checkout, and when he didn't see me there, I saw him step outside. At this point, I quickly ran to the nearest open cashier, rang out my items, and stuck my head out the door to look for him. I didn't see him there immediately, so I started trying to make my way back to where I was parked. I had parked a ways away, near the side of the store where a bunch of other small stores and restaurants were lined up, and as I was walking towards my car, I realized I saw him standing by the entrance that I had first entered the store through, and ducked behind a pillar immediately, hoping he didn't see me. I watched carefully behind the pillar, and as he scanned the parking lot, he obviously couldn't find me. After a minute or two, he started walking out towards the direction of the parking lot in front of the store, and so I took this opportunity to make a run for it to my car as soon as he was far enough away that I felt safe. As soon as I got into my car, I locked the door, and to my horror, when I looked up, he was standing there 15 feet away from my car with a shopping cart in front of him. I knew he followed me. He knew I knew. I fully believe he had chased after me, and when I made it to my car, he grabbed the nearest cart to make it look like he was collecting them from the parking lot. I remember just feeling absolutely terrified at that moment. I went home and immediately told my grandfather what had happened. I began crying and shaking, and my grandfather told me to get in the car. We were going to settle this. He and I drove up to the store in his car, and he walked me into the store and demanded we speak to the managers immediately. Both of them. When the managers arrived at customer service, he asked me to tell them what had been happening and demanded they ensure he left me alone or that he would be involving the police. The managers swore up and down they would take care of it, and as far as I know, he wasn't fired immediately because my friend, who first encountered him with me when this whole thing began, told me that she would see him from time to time when she was there by herself, but that any time I went with her, she would never see him. I fully believe he knew whenever I was there, only this time, instead of stalking me, he avoided me. Eventually, everyone who knew the situation stopped seeing him there, so I think he may have gotten fired or moved on from the store. Either way, I haven't had any issues since, but I have never in my life felt so afraid of another human being as I did the day seeing him make eye contact with me in the parking lot as I locked my car doors. It still creeps me out to think he was watching me so closely every time I entered the store that he could so easily avoid and follow me whenever he wanted. So, to the guy who stalked me every time I went grocery shopping for 4 months straight, let's never meet again. Neighbors from Hell by Riptide. Spoiler alert, I'm a lesbian. I thought this was a pretty well-known fact, but I guess no one had thought to tell my old neighbors. Actually, they presumed my girlfriend was my roommate, until they caught us kissing through the kitchen window. I remember that day and how it was pretty normal. My neighbors seemed friendly, a little too perfect white family, but still friendly. The mother and I had a garden, and we spent time talking about how our plants were going. She always had a weird laugh, like a donkey trying to be feminine, but I ignored it. The laugh wasn't the weirdest part. It wasn't even 5 minutes after the kiss, her husband was at our door. He was a bigger man, beefy, with a bald head of thick hair and thick eyebrows that seemed to move on their own accord. My girlfriend once said he looked like a Harry Potter character. I agreed. He started off with shouting at us. It was rather bizarre, since his shouting got so loud I had seen the across-the-street neighbor peek her head out to see what was wrong. It was mainly the generic stuff. God's will, you're going to hell, how dare you talk to my children. Their sons are 18 and 21. I thought that one was strange. My girlfriend, always the negotiator, managed to talk him down and back to his home. We went to bed silent that night, like speaking would remind us of what had just happened. I said we ought to move. The neighbors hate us. She said it doesn't matter. There would always be rude neighbors. I wish we had moved. The series of events between that day and 5 months later, where we finally found refuge in my brother's house, was god-awful. It started with my garden getting ripped up. My flower stems snapped and their roots showing. My carrots, which I was so proud of, upturned and smashed beneath a boot. Someone had taken a shovel and dug up clumps of dirt just to make sure nothing else could grow. I'm not ashamed to admit it, I cried. When my girlfriend left for work, an hour later, the D slur was carved over and over into the paint of our car. It covered nearly every inch of the left side door, and a few scratches across the right. Our headlights were smashed. They had let the air out of our tires. She called in sick. One night, at nearly 4 a.m, their oldest son stood at our door and rang the doorbell for 15 minutes straight. He only stopped when my girlfriend opened the upstairs window and said she would call the police. He also urinated on our porch furniture. Every morning, I would have to take our dog out for a mile-long walk. He's a golden retriever, so he needs the exercise. It didn't take long for their youngest to follow after us, shouting absurdities and saying he would F the gay right out of me. It was so bad, my neighbor on the other side, a 20-something gym nut, had to start walking with me. One of them taped a note on our door saying they would burn the house down, burn us for our sins. The police said there was no evidence who it was. We stopped going to the police. Their son filled water balloon up with urine and threw it at my house. Our dog had an outside bowl of water, and we found that it, too, had urine in it. Another time, it was rat poison, though that seemed too big an acceleration, so we told ourselves we were wrong. I was continuously calling my family members during this time. My parents thought the idea was crazy. It had to be some misunderstanding. Why, that sounded like something that came straight out of a movie. It couldn't be that bad. It was a rat poison that did it for us. Even though we told ourselves it was fake, the anxiety of one of us dying had gotten too much. I called my brother in tears, and he was there to help us pack the next day. He also chewed the neighbors from hell out, which was the perfect way for it to end. This is an excerpt taken from a series of CNF essays I wrote for our college class. Though it is completely true, it is written to be read as a story. not as a retelling of events. Just thought I'd make that clear. I used to work as a mall Santa, but one boy's Christmas list made me quit. Part 2 by Wendigo Roar. When I felt the blood rushing in my ears begin to calm to normal levels, I took a few deep breaths to settle my nerves. I could feel my chest heaving, and I tried to slow my breathing and embrace the silence of my home. Silence. The phone had stopped. I grabbed it off the floor from where I had dropped it, and I looked at the screen. 5 missed calls, 3 texts, no voicemail. So Molly may be crazy, but not crazy enough to think I'd check my voicemails. I'm in my 20s after all. I was terrified to check the texts, but the need to know was overwhelming me. I pulled up the notification. The first was just, Santa? The second was the standard followed up, question mark, question mark, question mark. The third one was a little more ominous. I hope you're not getting cold feet, Santa. I hate to have to come find you. Creepy as all heck, but at least she didn't know where I lived. The paranoid part of my brain thought, but maybe she does. But no, of course not. That would be ridiculous. Taking one more deep breath, I stood up and went back into the kitchen, grabbed a cup from the drying rack, filled it up with water, took a big gulp, and set it down the kitchen island. Not really paying attention, I set it down on the drawing that had filled me with such horror. The glass must have not fully dried on the rack, as around the edge of the base of water slowly crept across the paper. The child hidden under the bed began to look murkier, the paper turning wavy as it became more saturated. I shook my head at the insanity of it all when it hit me. The child hiding under the bed. I called the police. I explained that after a kid pissed on me, his mom agreed to go on a date with me, but the kid snuck me a drawing that promised a porno/snuff film type conclusion to the night. And the cop realized this was an absolutely horrifying situation, and it was time to rush over to her house and take care of everything. Except you and I both know that is total bull. It's the week before Christmas, and the cops are plenty busy without this strange story of mine. So when the cop on the line told me,
Yeah, but, we'll, go check out that pub you mentioned as soon as we can to see if there's, any woman matching your description.
I really couldn't blame them. I thanked him for his time and decided it was time for me to step up. This kid needed Santa. The first thing I did was call Molly. My hand was shaking so bad, I almost dropped the phone. It rang 3 times and I figured she was ticked at me and wouldn't answer. When the line clicked, I heard her voice. "Hey, Santa," she said, sounding irritated.
Molly, hey!
I said, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. "What's with the stand-up? I didn't expect you to be a jerk."
Oh, Molly, I'm so sorry.
I said. I hoped the shakiness of my voice sounded like me being upset about being late, rather than the objective terror of this woman. She didn't need to know the gig was up just yet.
The power went down in this part of town, and I got stuck in the darn elevator, and of course, giant metal box, there was no service in there.
Hopefully, she wouldn't think to verify my alibi until after I gotten that kid to safety. Molly took a really deep breath, then sighed into the phone. "I'm sorry," she said. "I was really angry at you, but being trapped in an elevator sounds really terrifying. Look, it might be a little late to hit the pub. I just gave up on you and left 10 minutes ago, and it was packed."
Molly, I'm really just so sorry. I feel like I really messed this up.
I said. "Don't be silly," she said. "It's hardly your fault that the power went out." Like I said, it's probably too late to get a table at the pub, but maybe we could try another place?
That would be awesome.
I told her, a grin on my face. This was going smoothly. Too smoothly. But I wasn't going to overthink this. I just needed the chance to snatch her kid and then run with him to the cops.
Forgive me if this is a little too forward, Molly, but I was thinking I could make it up to you by bringing over a bottle of wine and we could have a nice little date at home. That way you could be there with your little guy since it's so late.
That is very forward, Molly said in a sharp tone. Lucky for you, Santa. I like forward. I sighed in relief.
Wonderful. I have a bottle of Chateau Greysac Bordeaux that I think would pair very nicely with some charming conversation.
She laughed, and it was music as ever. How was she so pleasant? I would love that, she said, and gave me her address. Now, it's time to get ready. If Molly wanted Santa, she was getting Santa. 30 minutes later, I pull up to our address wearing the full Santa suit. It was go time. I had spent the whole ride over blasting hard rock and getting myself fired up. I needed to be ready for anything. I got out of the car and adjusted my Santa's bowl full of jelly belly. Walking up to the front door, I felt my hands shaking. I stabbed at the doorbell and missed. The shaking was so bad. I took a couple of deep breaths, then reached out and rang the doorbell with confidence. It only took 10 seconds before the door opened. She must have been near the door. Molly swung the door open. She was wearing a flowing black robe and her hair was pinned up. "Hello, Santa," she said, her voice sultry as all heck.
Hi, Molly.
I managed to get out. Now, I have to take a second to explain something. I was terrified of this woman being a closet Santa murderer, but she had gone from that cute girl next door at the mall to this smoking hot sex goddess standing right in front of me and looking at me with those eyes that seemed to say that she was going to eat me alive, and I was going to enjoy every second of it. Seriously, all I had was a crayon drawing. Maybe her kid was just weird. Kids can be weird. So when she grabbed the front of my Santa suit and pulled me inside, my resistance was minimal. I barely even heard her shut and lock the door behind us. All I could think of was the flash of thigh I saw when she moved, and the smell of roses that seemed to float around her like spring mist. Door closed. Molly turned back around to face me. She slowly stroked the sash that held her robe shut. "Well, Santa," she said, "have I been a good girl this year?"
I sure think so,
I told her, watching those fingers slowly loosen the sash. "Oh no," she said. "Let's see what I can do to convince you that I'm naughty." And with that, she pulled the sash apart and let the robe slide off of her shoulders.
Holy
I managed. "Exactly," Molly said. Then she grabbed the front of my suit, yanked me to her, and kissed me like I have never been kissed before. Which is probably why I didn't think anything of her grabbing me by the wrist until I felt cold metal. The handcuffs clicked into place, my hands secured in front of me. Molly's eyes narrowed and she slammed me against the nearest wall. She pulled out the pin, holding her hair up, and stuck it to my throat. I could feel exactly how sharp it was. "Do you think I'm stupid?" she snarled, the viciousness changed in her voice into something entirely different from what I heard from her before. "I know you know. The brat must have gotten a hint to you somehow. But it's too late for you now, you stupid, Stupid man. The annual Christmas sacrifice will go on, and I will bathe in a fountain of Santa's blood tonight." As she laughed and pressed the pointed tip of the pen tightly to my neck, only one thing was going through my mind. Is it possible I could have handled this better? How was I going to get out of this? I hope you enjoyed these 3 tales this evening. Tell me what you think down below. Make sure you subscribed and turn that bell to all notifications. If you'd like to help this channel, please check out my Patreon. Come back this Thursday for our day stories. Sleep tight, and I hope 42 doesn't bite.